global collaboration.
True, true. Hi, Frode. How
Hello,
are you?
Frode. You put
Uh,
your headset on.
Let me see.
We hear
You
you.
hear me better?
yes,
Yeah.
yes. All good now.
Fantastic. Just there's this dialogue that needs to go away from Zoom before it can say hello. Come on, go away. It's trying to do too many things there. Let's do this. Boom, here I am. And Eric
Hi,
is here.
Peter.
That's really nice.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, thank you for
Yeah,
inviting me.
No, absolutely. Glad you are here. And Mohit, I saw you were early. I sometimes I'm early, but it's extremely rare because I have to pick up Edgar, my son, as most of you know, right before.
yeah,
So it's kind of a rush to get here to you guys. So that's why I'm
yeah.
usually on time or a bit later. So yeah, very good. Hello, Peter. Peter. So what's the temperature in New York then, Peter?
Uh, well, I'm in North Carolina, a little further south. It's actually cooled down here. We had thunderstorms last night, so a little
Ah,
bit of it's only
that's
in the
bad.
upper
Well,
80s
That,
Fahrenheit. Yeah.
that sounds
well, I
good.
traded I traded 112 degrees the other day for 70 degrees with torrential downpours today.
It's same in Mumbai. Torrential downpours. The streets are flooded
Really?
all across. I think at least 80, 100 kilometer radius.
Wow.
I'm in Delaware and we just got a flash flood warning, so we're getting weather too.
That's bad.
So, Peter Vasilko, in New York, is only 24 degrees today, but as you said, that's not the main issue. Today, we are actually warmer in London. We have 31
Ah.
in real degrees. I don't know what that is in your Fahrenheit thing, obviously. But most of you here are American, so I guess I should make allowances.
Don't apologize for being logical.
Yeah, well said, Peter. And Tom is here. So I have to ask you, did any one of you see any of the
Hi,
football
Tom.
games? Hi, Tom. Have any of you
Yes,
seen any of the football games?
yes.
And what did
Who
you
are you
think?
rooting for, England or Norway?
Yes. This is recorded. I'm not going to give you more than that.
I only follow Gran Sumo.
There is, I'll just, hang on, I'll just, yeah, it's kind of interesting actually, because some of it actually goes into our world. I'm just going to upload a brief picture here real quick from computer. One moment. Where is it?
Yeah, that was a
Yeah,
mad game last night.
yeah. Are you
The
talking England or
England-Mexico
Norway?
match. The England
Yeah,
match.
it was too late for us, but
Oh
uh, we,
yeah,
we
that's
we
true.
we saw the Norway one. But what's really interesting is it used to be at least the England team. By the way, Eric, you haven't suddenly
Yeah,
entered into the wrong crowd. Okay, this is
no,
not
I
our
get it.
normal discourse. Just to
That's
be
fine.
clear.
You go
Yeah.
ahead.
Um, like I've seen some of the top games in history because it kind of had to, and it was very often these egos running around on the pitch. But the Norway game was much more organized, and the England game, considering what they were up against, the manager, the way he put it together, really impressive. It really comes down to the things we talk about: collaboration, figuring out what's going on spatially. All of that was there, just in a ball manner. So yes, my son did go to school today in the Norwegian football uniform.
Uh-oh,
His
that's
uncle got him
dangerous.
that. Well,
That's dangerous.
well, yeah,
This
kind of
for
it.
this week at least.
Yeah, maybe.
Holland
Well,
plays for Man City, right?
Holland.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's changed his name. He used to have it differently. I have no idea.
Yeah, sports
But
Yeah, but
technology is very interesting.
he
If
plays
you think
for
about,
a
well,
yeah.
he does play for a British team, so that does become an interesting
Yeah.
issue. So today, Mohit did a presentation a while ago, which was great. He has sent me a paper that has taken me a significant amount of time to suddenly look at, and it's very, very interesting. So we're going to schedule him doing a implementation presentation soon, where it's not why, but what. So I look forward to that. I did plan to have it as the last slide in the in my brief, let's have a discussion presentation today. But it's so very, very different from the topic of today that I don't think it's useful. So I'm just going to show you guys a few slides. And Eric, being the newbie here, the way we do this, first of all, we try to be a very friendly bunch. I believe we are. If someone has to leave early or come in late, it's never a problem. Some people come here for many sessions, some come here for a few. We all have lives, so there's no formality as, oh, I'm sorry I have to leave or whatever. It's just the way it is. Similarly, we tend to start with some sort of a presentation, and then we make not a lot of effort in staying on topic.
That's
So
fine. Yeah.
it's just a kickoff. So, right.
I'm here to learn.
You're here to learn. Okay, cool. I'm not sure if there's going to be any learning happening, but I hope we'll have a good enough time. You can see, right?
Yes.
So I've had, as I'm sure you have had, a real problem with two things. Why would anyone want to work in a headset? And what are the things to work with in the headset? So today, at the beginning at least, it's really about the elements in space. What are they? What should they be, right? So also, this is for thinking, not necessarily for academics. We often tend to go towards academics, but this is not. We don't have to worry about citation, bibtech, and all of that in this context, right? But let's try to rethink thinking, which is a bit of a stretch, right? So I had a chat with my friend Shannon, Eric. That's who sometimes I call. Yeah, good. You got that immediately. And it went through a few things. I'm going to go by them quite quickly because they're just really brief inspirations for us. But it talked about how human memory. Oh, by the way, the way this conversation was had was Claude 5 Fable is back, so I'm sure you all know. So I asked Claude first, if you look at Claude 5 Fable, if you only look at neuroscience and psychology, what are the things we should have in our space? It immediately downgraded from Fable to 4.8 because of guardrails and all of that's fine. So I then said, okay, can you please summarize this and rephrase it as a question so we can try it with Fable? And it failed again. But what happened was, because there was a new instance of Claude, it started arguing with itself. I know you all have a lot of experience with AIs, but I really found it was quite fruitful, because I went through this 4 times where it said, oh, this really makes sense, this is great. And then the next time it would say, nah, that's really stretching the point. So that's how these few slides came about, right? Started talking about how human memory is reconstructive. We don't remember a thing as a solid factual object. Talked about structures, right? And then a really nice thing, and I wish Mark Anderson could be here today. The primitive, as in primitive like shapes, primitive active mind isn't asserting, it's distinguishing. That makes sense, right? This is different from this. Not necessarily this thing is. Kind of useful.
Or this is the same as this, or similar.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. So this became interesting because I said, what about the notion of a node if you look at the etymology? Because a node originally meant not, of course. So then the string, the connector, is the vital thing. The not is just a thing on it. This is the thing that Claude argued against itself a few times. But what comes out of this is, I'm sure we would agree that if you have a knowledge graph, any node or connection should be interchangeable. You should be able to display it like the node is a connection or the connection is a node. And in the system that I'm working on, where you can define concepts, because here on these ones, it keeps talking about threads and connections rather than objects, right? This one is kind of obvious. You can't focus on many things, but yeah. So build the knot and the thread. Building them together. These are really the key points. So all I decided to do as a practical thing that came out of this is I'll show you. It's so simple. So let's open. Mohit, I've been reading your paper again by putting it in author. So let's say I had defined the word augment, right? So in here I had define, and I had lots of words. In fact, let's find something that is defined. No, nothing's defined. Okay.
I wrote this in author.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is really fascinating in terms of how Claude can actually contribute towards a function, right? So it said that the system, and I'm sorry it wasn't in the slides, the system should ideally not let you just add a thing. You should have to add it with connections. So that makes sense. So all I'm thinking about is adding, when you go through the definition you've written, Eric, just briefly, this is just like a glossary, a defined concept in my software author, which is obviously how I think, right? So why not, when you select text in there, should you not be able to define that directly from here? So that is a function, right? So that's a function in a piece of software, but the idea is that, let's just open something. This one I think has a few defined. Okay, so if you look at this, this is a real document that I have been working on. Here's a definition of Engelbart. Ignore whether it's correct or useful or whatever, but for the sake of argument, so to speak, right? The bold text are links to other defined terms. So if I click on pharmacon, it'll show me this. Click on Socrates, it'll go to that. So if you then, while you are defining your things to see if you understand them, can define the terms you're using, it may be useful. Did I overtalk that, or did that make sense?
Yeah, that does. I am reminded of the browser company of New York. In the browser, the Arc, when they launched on phone, they had this thing, which was I'm just opening. If I still have that, I don't have that. But they had this thing, browse for me. So you can highlight it, and there's this thing, that would open up browse for me. So what browse for me used to do was it used to dynamically generate a web page, but that was not specifically for you. If you did that with something on your phone, it will show you exactly the same web page as it would to me. But for both of us, that browse for me, what it could do should be actually a sort of give a little individualistic based on the kind of things that you have in your resource library. The kind of things that you want, that you have previously interacted with, that could be relevant. So in here, when I was just reminded of this, when you were the definition of a term, of a relationship, that even that even when we are talking about book or an article or a scientific paper, the kind of bibliographies that are there, they are set, but there could be a lot more relevant based on the reader's experience.
Yeah, that makes sense. And just to kind of frame this a little bit, when we go through these things, it's really important, I think, to be very abstract in our thinking and it's just have fun. So we can imagine we make a piece of knowledge here, right? And then, it means this stuff. But then I have to define one of these stuffs. So when I show you a Mac interface, that's a very kludgy way to try to make this real. So hopefully we can think of, and Mohit, what I think you're talking about is partly context. So you're defining these things, but there's all this other relevant stuff. So, but if we think about it as floating clouds or spheres, which I think we should, it can become difficult to grab them. And one thing that I think Claude said quite well is that these things do need a shape so the human can touch them and interact with them and move them. Contextual, defined, further defined, and so on.
So I've been thinking about Douglas Engelbart's demo showing his route going home, the grocery store, and all the things he has to get. So if you think about that, was a very simple map which had links into each node, and you could expand and collapse. And I think we need that metaphor in AR somehow. So a document I shared with some of you, it has a story of a distributed team working in AR. And what I found interesting is that Claude picked that out, that node graph, as a first-class element. So something to think about.
I'm so glad you said that, because to me, that bit of Doug's demo is probably the coolest, and it's probably the furthest from what we have now. I mean, we used to have image maps, right? An average person could do something like that, and then they disappeared. And the problem we have developing for something like visionOS, if you do it native rather than WebXR or something, is that you can't connect to things currently that aren't in the document. So, Eric, what you're talking about is absolutely the kind of thing we need, where you have, whether it's a root home or whatever the shape is, to be able to get more stuff is just absolutely super important. But can you tell us some more about the distributed AR team you were talking about?
Okay, so yeah, at the beginning of my chat, I was just ideating about what it would take to build NLS today. And Claude had some ideas, but then I had it write a story. And the prompt is write a story about a distributed team using this system in an augmented reality environment where they can meet virtually at times convenient for them, co-work with other team members who are present, leave notes on shared boards in the environment, and optimize team productivity towards a project goal. So I wrote a nice story, and yeah, it was pretty much what I would expect, but then I added some wrinkles to it to illustrate the security concerns. And I was thinking local first. If we had decentralized data in this system, and it outlined some security issues with rekeying. So I'm going to share the link to the document in chat. And yeah, there's also an issue in that GitHub where you could comment on it, and I have some links in that issue to other resources if you want to explore this topic further.
So this is really fun, because I started today talking about what should things in space be, and Claude said, forget the things, it's the connection. And then Mohit makes me, through being in my email inbox for a couple of weeks, read about context as a system. Right. And then Tom Hames is building a knowledge navigator. And Eric, you are looking into ideas around rebuilding NLS. This to me is very, very exciting. You know, if we can manage to find ways for this stuff to work together. I mean, there's been so many types of formats and interchanges. There's been, well, there is, not only has been JSON and all these things, but maybe for fun, we should look at things like MCPs. We aren't building AI systems, and I have no idea what an MCP is in reality, but it seems to be very flexible, since it's one AI saying, here's some stuff to another AI. So I'm looking at what you shared, Eric, but I'm wondering what you guys think about the way these things can flow together. Especially you,
MCP was
Mr.
the
Hames.
villain. The MCP was the villain in Tron.
That was a different MCP. Is that what it's called, MCP? I don't even know that.
Master Control Protocol. Yep.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Master Control Program. That's the Tron bad guy.
Yep. Or male chauvinist pig. That also works.
For anyone listening, it's model context protocol. That's what it means.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
run out of initials after a while. It's just it's funny. Um, yeah, I've kind of had a shall I say existential crisis over the last few weeks as I have been trying to drag my students kicking and streaming up the thinking layers and thinking that giving them the right tools in AI to do that will help them make that transition because that's an eternal struggle as a teacher. Um, and that's why I put the Bloom's taxonomy on there because that is something I don't know how many of you guys know what Bloom's taxonomy is, but it's very, it's kind of one of those foundational things in in the educational world to people who actually pay any attention to what actual teaching is. And that's a fairly small percentage of people in the educational world, but that's another story entirely. Um, but it basically goes from the lowest or the foundational level, which is basically read and regurgitate, all the way up to create at the very highest level, where you're synthesizing things and building your own things out of them. And the AI can reasonably mimic everything up to the analyze level. And the and it can do create too. It's just bad at creating. I mean, we have very low standards for creation sometimes, but if you really think about it, the people who are real artists should not be threatened by AI. But the thing that I wanted to get to here is that this proved to be a lot harder than I expected. Um, People are trained to work at the low levels. People are trained to work in an industrial system where they are cogs in the machine. And that training is hard to break. And a lot of the stuff we're talking about here in terms of being able and I know our audience, well, at least it was for the Sloan project, was academics, right? Scholarly work and things like that. Theoretically, they are already working at that higher level. I wouldn't put that as a guarantee though. Um, but the idea that we can suddenly build it and they will come has been a bit of a shocker for me. And I'm questioning it in the context of the knowledge navigator, but I also think depending on who our audience ultimately is, if we look at this as a world-changing device or system, like Doug looked at the NLS, which is also, again, a way of pushing yourself up that higher up. That's what he's talking about when he's talking about augmenting human intellect. He's talking about pushing us to the creativity level. The version of Bloom's that existed. There was a version of Bloom's back in the 1950s, but it's been superseded by this more complex model, which has 6 levels. He may or may not have been familiar with it. I don't know. But that's clearly what he's talking about when he's talking about augmenting human intellect. He's talking about, and the thing I said a few weeks ago is that it's only augmentation if you grow from the process as well. If you're basically the same place you are at the end of the process, then you were at the beginning of the process, i.e., I asked a bunch of questions about history. It gave me a bunch of answers. I've forgotten those answers. I'm back to where I was.
Mm.
um, then you're not augmented at all. But if you are thinking it a different way, if you're thinking about problems in a different way, and I think that's a critical thing when we're talking about here, when we're talking about our system or your system, Frode, is that it's about shifting perspectives and making those connections in a different way. Because otherwise, why do it? Because it's already all in books, right? So I personally agree with you that books are a good way to hide information. And I love books, but they are not terribly efficient in some ways in terms of seeing the constellation of information because they're a linear product. Um, and so, yeah. And oh, by the way, I have been telling you, Frode, that the key is the connections, and so I see Claude finally confirmed me.
Oh yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. It's an important thing. Knowledge is connections. But it was really interesting to have Claude fight me and say, "Why are you talking about stuff? Shouldn't talk about the stuff. Should talk about the connectors."
Yep. And that's what Doug was, and certainly that's what Ted Nelson's talking about when he's talking about transclusion. It's what Doug essentially is talking about in augmenting human intellect in terms of that's all about making connections. It's what Bush, of course, the associative trails, Vannevar Bush, that's connections. I mean, this is a repeating theme and something that anybody who looks at this stuff from, Engelbart and Nelson on Alan Kay, you pick your poison, all recognize that that's the critical element that's always been missing from our supposed implementation of Bush's ideas from as we may think. It's that we lose those we've never built a good connection machine. We think we have, but the connections have still all been manual. If you are using the web and you're creating links and things like that, is your making the connection based on what your biases and your other, this is important. There should be a link to this so that person can go read that article. That's your call. And I'm not saying to take that away, but it's still working through the blinders of the author in a sense. And so how do we get beyond the blinders of the author? And then how do you build something that people are able to consume? And that's my problem right now is I'm like, okay, yeah, I can't just put this plate in front of people and expect them to understand how to eat it. I had a bit of movement, but it really is, I'm pulling people by the scruff of their neck across these lines, where I thought that the AI would be more effective at automating those kinds of questioning, because that's what I've been talking about. And it happens with me. I'll often start out with a low-level question, and by the end of the conversation, I'm at the create level going, oh, well, this piece of information connects to this piece. Now I get it. Now I can put these together and make something different. And that to me is incredibly exciting. That's what I consider learning. But getting my students to do that is not easy. And this is a big problem because it's also a problem for the workforce. Because if we're going to hand AI to all these people and expect them to suddenly become massively more productive, well, productive to me means working at a higher level, and it's not about working faster, it's about working smarter. And industrialization and the way we measure things in terms of productivity and things like that, it's all about going faster. And that's a massive problem too, because that's where you make, first of all, from the perspective of using AI, that's where your hallucinations really bite you in the butt. Because if you're in a hurry and you're not checking things and you're not thinking about what you're doing, you're expecting the AI to do it for you, and it makes a mistake, then you own that mistake. And that's where we get the stories of the lawyers submitting briefs with cases that are fictional. And I've done it too. I screwed up the last assignment in my class in terms of the instructions because I was in a hurry at that point. I was just putting stuff together, and the AI did something that I looked at after the fact and went, oh, yeah, this is incredibly confusing. Fortunately, it wasn't a big deal at the end of the day because most of my students didn't make it to that assignment, but those that did. So, but yeah, it's a thinking problem. And so can we use these technologies to elevate our thinking?
So, Tom, you, in one of your articles, you made the point that I think the title even was, never ask the AI just one question.
Right.
There has to be a follow-up. So thanks. Hey, Peter, hand. Yes, go.
Yeah, it's gotten so bad with the AI usage in law that they have formally changed the continuing legal education requirements for the bar in New York State to require us to take actual courses to tell us that we shouldn't just trust the citations that the AI comes up with to legal cases that may not actually exist. It's that bad because people are just offloading too much of their cognitive activity to the LLM models, and they're way, way, way too trusting. So now we literally have to sit through hours of being lectured that it's not a good idea to hand the judge papers that you didn't actually create yourself or bother to read.
Yeah, I mean,
I think a lot of times we overestimate how much intellectual activity is actually going on, but that's another conversation.
But that goes for humans too. I mean, I had a conversation with my closest friends today who is in a completely different discipline, and I was thanking her for the dialogue because you guys focus on this similarly to me, and that's really good. We may tunnel vision us a little bit. She comes in and asks completely different things, and because I respect her intellect, if she sounds stupid, I'm the one being stupid. So it's a really good opportunity to think further. But this kind of way of how to learn to deal with other minds, one of the exciting things about now is we have to learn how to deal with AI. This is really part of what literacy means now. And, the little anecdote in the beginning, I made the AI argue against itself. I didn't put it into another AI. That's kind of fun, but it's this. So, Tom, the stuff you're trying to teach the kids, because you're on the firing line here, it's the same stuff. And I don't know, it's a pioneer time we're living through when it comes to this. Oh, Eric, please speak your question. That's a great question.
Okay, so I'm wondering if you had different types of learning environments, embodied learning using the body physically, or can we have an AR learning environment and situations which can actually put the students in a situation where they need to cooperate or analyze something critically, and maybe they can use some AI, but maybe AI can prompt them in a way to think more critically if it's built correctly.
And that is the
would,
fundamental question, if it's
Yeah.
built correctly.
Yeah,
This is not a technological problem. This is a human problem.
exactly.
I mean, right now, I don't know if you can hear me. My son, who is an incredible boy, is not a very loud boy. He had an argument with a friend, and there were some issues on how he dealt with it that I don't agree with. So, that's a human teaching a human thing. And the worst person to teach is, of course, the parent at the moment. Later on, it turns out he will have picked up things. When it comes to distributed teaching, with students, of course, it's a different dynamic. But despite talking about abstractions in the beginning of the call today, information is very, very literal. So maybe it's more useful for us if we talk about specific things. I mean, right now, considering what we're sitting through, climate change is one of those issues. How do you teach that? I mean, that may be basically a movie, maybe better than any facts or interactive system, right? It really comes down to what we're trying to transfer to someone, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, if you've never read Diana Laurillard's work on education, she used to be vice chancellor of the Open University, and she's done a lot of really good thinking about teaching and learning in a technology environment, but the fundamentals of what happens in a learning environment. And she has this thing called the conversational framework, which is showing all of the different conversations that happen between the teacher and the students, and among the students, and within the student. And it's a really good guide. The thing that I have really noticed in terms of my own students is I can get incremental change if I'm in a synchronous situation with them. I'm either in a Zoom kind of class or in a physical classroom with them. But the ones that really are, this is where the bloodbath occurred this summer, was in my completely asynchronous classes, because they never get that conversation with me, because I can't meet with them live. I can't force them to meet with me live. I can hold office hours, but if they show up, I mean, I did that a couple times and like 2 students showed up. But it was awful because they couldn't. I was hoping the AI would replace that, and they would have those conversations with the AI. And I put all sorts of materials together, and I wrote, I even created comics to illustrate it, because they won't read lots of instructions. I mean, this is the fundamental problem too. It's the same thing with game design. You can either make it realistic or easy. And the trick with a game designer is to balance those two against each other, because if it's too realistic, it's unplayable. There's a famous game, it was the North African campaign or something like that, that was partially made as a joke, but it's supposedly so complex that no one's ever actually completed it. So But that's the problem as a teacher too. And in terms of any sort of information exchange, you make it simple and you lose it's hard to make things simple, but you lose that level of specificity. But if you make it too complex, they're going to ignore it because they can't understand it anyway. Now, of course, AI can help on both of those counts. I mean, I've used AI extensively to write my instructions to be more understandable. I have used, and I tell my students also, if you don't understand what I'm saying or you don't understand what these instructions are saying, drop it into your local chatbot and say, explain this to me so I can understand it. And don't let it off the hook until you do. They don't do that as far as I can tell. But but the point is that these are things that to me seem glaringly obvious solutions to problems and roads that they just do not take. And again, that's been my real frustration. I mean, I was so hoping that AI would 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 put that in front of them. But again, I think it's partially training. I think they've just been so trained by the system. The fallback when they start to panic is, well, what do you want me to do? And I'm like, well, I want you to think, and I don't want you to imitate me. But of course, imitating is what they've learned to do. The teacher says, well, do what I do. And that's not thinking for yourself. And this is the problem. But this goes well beyond my students, though. I've been a
Yeah.
manager. I've managed 50, 60 people. Exactly the same problem. You can give a lot of detailed instructions and really handcuff people, or you can take your chances on the people thinking. And that latter one, they don't all, you would think in my situation, I always like that. If my boss said, okay, just handle it. Here's where we need to get to. Let's just handle it. But most of my employees found that very uncomfortable because I was pushing the risk onto them, and thinking is risky. And that's kind of what I'm struggling against a bit now. I don't know if, again, I don't think there's a technological solution to it. I think there are things that can augment our ability to overcome it. I still think AI can do that, but it's going to be a lot harder than I was thinking, say, a couple of months ago.
So one of the things you said there about instructions, Tom, when I was teaching, one of the things I did with the first years, I asked them to go and take 3 black and white photographs of something of London. It needed to be printed on A4 paper, black and white, square in the middle. And the whole point was exactly that. I asked for 3 pictures. If someone gave me 4, I would fail them. Right? To really get it early in, read the damn instructions. Right? Of course, it was first year, so it was a bit of a shock class where they were like, "Oh, what's going on?" Once the emotion was there, who cares? It's not important. But just getting people to read the instructions is hard. But if we go a little past education and look at our own, actually, Eric, here's the thing. Do you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hello.
A bit of context, thank you.
Okay. Um, so I'm a retired software engineer. I started in the corporate world doing COBOL, year 2000, and eventually Java and C Sharp. And these days, I'm trying to learn Clojure on the recommendation of Sam Hahn, who's a mentor to me. And he trying to get my head around the immutability and how it could solve concurrency problems. But I've been interested in the ideas of Ted Nelson and Doug Engelbart, and really thinking ahead, because it really is a shame when you see how they have great ideas that just haven't gone that far. And so I'm excited about possibilities for AR. I've done little experiments like using A-frame just to get a sense of a 3D space, but I see possibilities. I'm also interested in decentralized data. I've been just exploring those technologies. Um, but one key thing about that, it's very difficult to find a business model for decentralized data. Um, yeah. So there's like a different culture where you have to um, you like a hacker culture that small groups may adopt it, but yeah, practically we're talking about there's that mainstream like Apple community with their Vision Pro. I'm glad you have an offering going in their app store to get um, yeah, some publicity around the possibility of text in AR. Um, so there's a lot of possibilities. So I'm just trying to figure out where I can fit in, how I can help right now.
Thank you, Eric. I'm looking a little bit also at our chat, and I have to ask the question, considering the problems in the world right now, where we're talking about war, climate change, uh, equality differences in many, many realms, and so on, what are the things that we, for the sake of this discussion, the six of us, really think should be taught to the next generation? Because if we're talking about straightforward maths, engineering, history, to an extent, that's solved. But I do think all of us agree that metacognition is important. People really need to learn to think better, as do we, I'm sure. I'm sure we can also be improved. But as an example, what are the things we would really prioritize being taught? Because Peter is talking about, Peter Wasilka, why don't you elaborate? Because it may come into this discussion. What are these professors really trying to teach, right?
Well,
And what do we want to teach?
in law school, they were trying to teach their worldview, and it wasn't a party politics thing. It was just how the world works and how things function. For instance, I locked horns with my advisor in law school many times over software patents. And I told them, I'm a programmer. I know dozens of programmers. There's not one of them that's motivated by the idea of running out and grabbing software patents and litigating over them. It's a non-issue, but the official sanctioned law school view was that the only reason the software industry exists is because of our rigorous IP laws, and they have to constantly be strengthened and built up higher and thicker. And because I was questioning that worldview and my pushback made sense, it suffered when it came time to writing letters of recommendation for potential positions after law school. So I paid a price for my honesty, and a lot of other people had similar situations. We had one student in my freshman year who was doing pushback on questions related to Middle Eastern politics. It shouldn't have had anything to do with class, but because he expressed that viewpoint, the professor came down on him like a ton of bricks, and that was the end of his participating in class. As soon as he correlated the fact that true, actual open discussion results in severe personal consequences that extend into the grading world, unfortunately, uh, he learned a lesson. So, what were they teaching? They were teaching the students to as perfectly parrot their views on literally everything. Not even politics per se, just if the professor views that certain abstract values are more important than other ones, then you damn well better parrot that value hierarchy when you're writing your exam answers, or you're going to suffer. So the only question that the students ask is, what do you want me to think? I know you don't really care what I actually think. What do I need to tell you that I think so that you will think that you've succeeded in teaching me to think about everything the way you think about everything? So that you will reward me for thinking about everything. So please let me become a clone of you, dear professor. How can I better let myself become a clone of you? I am putty in your hands. And that's the mentality that is inculcated into the students because they see what happens when somebody gets out of line.
So this is really interesting because I I don't know the right word for it, but I would say I neither agree or disagree. I see it differently, and we should have a word for that. And that is, if you pardon me, Peter Wasilko, let's say a lawyer view, and I have several friends who are lawyers, not just you, Peter, may be that your stance in the world is that it's the patent thing. If your patent, if the only tool you have is a hammer, everything is a nail, right? It's not just that. It is also our everyday background processes. So my father was a businessman. For him, how's he going to make money? He was a good man, but the primary driver for him was, like we talked about football, making money once you have enough to live in business is goals. You know, you're doing something. In the military, you have a very different worldview. How do you blow up that bunker? I think we need to figure out a way, and I'm so glad this came up, to harness this, because we are a bunch of, whether we're politically leftist or right or whatever is a bit irrelevant, but all of us here are Doug Engelbart, want to do better with the world, take care of each other. We expect other people to not want to destroy our database, so to speak. And as most of you know, Ted Nelson thought that Doug was extremely unrealistic in this. So how can we take into account these professors who have this worldview? They may very well be representing their profession. I mean, I've noticed it within my profession too. You know, I saw your comment there, Tom, but you know, I have a PhD, but I got my PhD as an adult, and I got it for many reasons. That wasn't just the straight through studying. The reason that I'm building my software is partly so that people like my dear friend Mark, who many of you know and who I love and adore greatly, shouldn't just be people like him who can do well in academia. He doesn't love the kind of things he has to do, like LaTeX and stuff, but he has the brain that enables him to do it. So, you know, all these professors, we need to, I don't know, it's an interesting discussion. I'm glad it came up. Tom, you wrote a book. I'm not surprised. You write a lot.
This is technically my first book, but yeah,
Really?
learn at your own risk. Which is, I wrote this during the pandemic. My Discovering Digital Humanity was a work that took years to write. I wrote this in 4 months, and it was kind of meant to be a sequel, but it took too long to fix the other book, so it became, the first book came out second. But it's based on the same kind of thinking. But yeah, I mean, we should never forget that education is an industrial system. It's built on grades. Law school is kind of the pinnacle of that. And I wisely decided not to get into law school. I was foolish, though, in thinking that when I went to grad school, that this was an invitation for me to think for myself and develop mechanisms for thinking myself. And I learned that that was not the case with this particular professor who failed me on my political theory comp because I would not kowtow to her view of these books, which I thought was naive. I think she was. I'm generally speaking a non-interventionist when it comes to international. The course was ethics and international relations. And I'm generally a non-interventionist when it comes to international relations because although I may want to help, I've seen time and time again, if it's not your country, you're probably going to mess it up worse than when you went into it. There are very few exceptions to that. People sort of have to solve their own problems at a certain level. And especially if that country is distant in space and culture. That makes it even worse. So interventions in the Middle East with the United States, or at the time it was talking about Yugoslavia, and although that turned out better than I expected in the end, but at the same time, yeah, she was very much, hey, if these circumstances occur, then you're justified in going in, and I'm like, that's not what these authors say. They put up a list of criteria that's awfully hard to meet. And if you think about this objectively, you're never going to meet their standards to do this. And she didn't agree with me. And we went back and forth, and she failed me on my comp twice. And yeah, prime directive, exactly. That's exactly right. So, but yeah, I mean, the point is that the system is designed to create conformity. And I would argue that law school is very much designed to create conformity. And in a world of AI, in a world of AR, we're trying to break down walls. And this is a very nonconformist notion. And I think those parts of Engelbart that never got accepted were the most dangerous in terms of that conformity argument. I mean, they took his tools to make things faster and easier, but they didn't necessarily make them better. And
So
yeah.
I just bought your book, Tom. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
And for those of you who are not in the Future of Text series of books, please get in there. And if you publish the book, tell me, because then I'll buy it. I'll probably read it, but definitely put it on my bookshelf. It's about a meter long now of books, so people have been in it. So thank you, Tom.
That's great.
Okay. Eric asked a nice question, so I'm just going to share something with you really briefly. You can still see, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is a little guide to using Author for Vision that I just put together this weekend. Forget about the words. I'm just going to show you a few images because the question Eric asked was about reading in AR, right? So a basic thing we've done is you can read like this. It's a normal scrollable document that you can resize. And you have a context menu that's kind of cool and a toolbar. But we did a thing where the stuff in space, the nodes, there's a category called sections, which can be automatically created based on a document's heading and the text below it. So that means that you can instantly have all the sections of your book like this, or by depth, or anything you want. It is extremely rudimentary and unsophisticated, but it does immediately blow up what a book or a document is. You know, when you can walk around and look at it. Of course, feel free, whatever, to look at all the different things like this. But it's because of that question, I just wanted to show that. That's all. So okay. Yeah, no, go on. I'm sorry.
On that. So when I see those pictures, that's a case of the system automatically dividing up the book, and I guess it's assuming that it's an unstructured document. See, Engelbart had structuring, and that's why you were able to collapse sections, see the first line of every paragraph and things like that. So the thing is, yeah, can we get back to a structuring methodology or automatically structuring?
It's semi-structured.
Yeah.
And the structures come from, number one, are the headings themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And number two, we have the notion of marking sentences, not just highlighting them, but marking them. And the reason for that, by default, they turn orange. There's two reasons. Number one, as you work through your own document, and you get to a paragraph, you can pull out the sentence that really, or words that really, that's what it's about. And if you don't have one for a paragraph, then you probably should rewrite your paragraph. But when you then go into an outline or overview, all of these show up. So instead of the first sentence of every paragraph, it becomes the first semantically valid unit of every paragraph that comes up. So that's why I'm saying semi-structured. What you saw here, you're absolutely right to, in a nice way, attack as being, compared to NLS augment, kind of a kludge. I completely agree that we need to go further in the direction of the system knowing what bits are so we can more intelligently change the view spec and so on. So fully agree with you there, Eric.
Okay, thanks.
The reason I showed that was partly because of that nice question, but also as a counterpoint to our discussion today where we're trying to ignore both paper and text and look at thinking. I wonder what thoughts there are on that. You know, if we try to ignore teaching and try to ignore books, oh, 1 second. Say hi. Yes. I guess say hi.
Hi.
They can
Hi.
only hear me through here, so you can't hear them. Can you please open my windows and close the door? Because you and Mom are being super loud. So if we ignore teachers and professors and grades, and if we just imagine this beautiful idea of building, let's say, knowledge sculptures, and knowing that the vocabulary around that, we are really ignorant at, all of us, all humans, that we want to do something towards that. What should we be able to even do in such a thing? I think even that question is difficult.
Yeah, very difficult.
So I'd like to talk about vocabulary. because you have definitions for how you see the world. I have my own understanding, and to get to a common understanding, there has to be some kind of mapping. And what if each individual had their own glossary that they build over time, and then it can be transcluded to other people's glossaries so they see the relationships between the terms. And it's also related to topic mapping.
I completely disagree with you,
Okay.
which is great fun. Obviously, you know Jack Park.
Yeah.
So I have great fondness for the whole field of topic mapping, knowledge mapping, all of that stuff. But just to twist it, especially with the beginning discussion we had today on what the brain really does, it doesn't store object things; it stores object relationships. I think the notion of being able to, Eric has a definition of, let's say, America. You just had a big birthday. Let's talk about America, right? I'm sure your notion of America and all of our notions are very, very different. But the key is a lot of things we will share in that notion. Like we will share that George Washington was a person. That's not really disputed, right? So what becomes really interesting then is not the mapping as objects. And Eric, I think you probably disagree with this. So I know Can we find a way where we don't have a knowledge mapped, but we have directions? Right? Like, yeah, literally think more about magnets and things rather than the things themselves. Because if we just have two Americas come together, there's so much behind them. Maybe there is more of a, some of my context as a person, and Mohit being also a non-American, he's Indian, I'm European. I have a Viking history. Some of these are obviously going to interpret how we see America. Some of them might not. Some of them, I may go against my own culture because I don't agree with the predominant culture. So how do we get these kind of more dynamic, rather than a plug, more of a push and pull?
So I'd like to suggest, can you trace the provenance of the evolution of your concept of America over time? And then can that be mapped to somebody else's understanding, where you see everything and they can get to a common understanding, even if they disagree on specific points?
So this is where it becomes very human. So I'll bring up one very, very specific thing. Peter mentioned, or somebody actually mentioned in chat, politics, like Middle Eastern politics. So I'm going to bring up a situation where let's not waste our time on the politics, but on the human side of it, and that is Israel-Palestine at the moment, right? So I come from perspective of being Norwegian and having friends who deal with a situation who are very much like Palestinians are fighting occupation, blah, blah, blah. That's the stuff we don't need to discuss. But in my own journey, from Jewish perspectives, has been really, really fascinating, because logically I can see things in one way, but I'll give you a very specific nugget. So one of my friends I went to school with, who is British Christian white male, his father was Jewish. His brother considers himself Jewish, but not him. Fair enough. But he took an entire evening to make me emotionally understand that the fear of the fact that he is a Christian, but he has a certain hereditary connection to being Jewish, means that other people may not accept his Christianity. They may point the finger at him and say, well, no, you are Jew, right? That's the kind of thing that I don't think can be mapped necessarily. Maybe it can. And Eric, I would love to work towards it, but that's the kind of human lived experience that a close friend I've known since I was 15 takes an hour to drum into my head. There's a lot of emotion, and these are the important issues, whatever the politics, whatever the identity, how do you really push through to experience someone else's reality?
Yeah, so there's stories, there's writing, there's movies, and that's multimodal AR
Yes. Yeah.
potentially.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. That's it. You know, it's easy in this community specifically to get down to how do you put text in a box and put it over there in the left and draw a line to something else and call that meaning. It can be very useful, but it can also be very barren. So, Eric, you really pushed today with your question specifically in the chat to how do we enliven that? How do we allow people to live that without it only being a story, without it only being a movie? How do we do that?
So Ted Nelson envisioned like an edit decision list where, say, you're editing a movie, you choose this segment, these 3 minutes, and you're making your point that way. Well, yeah, what if everybody had that capability to make their points and the media could be transcluded from credible sources, however that's defined?
Yeah, credible is the problem there. You can take snippets out of YouTube, put the timestamp in the URL and actually use those to piece together something. No, whether that's any better than taking clips of books and putting them in the text. I mean, it's a variation on the same theme. You're trying to tell a story and you're pulling in things to prove your point or show it's not just me. These guys have it,
You got to
Footnotes are,
relate
you know,
that this is Eric's view of the world,
yeah.
that these segments represent his worldview at this point in time. Maybe
Yes.
that'll change in a year.
Yeah. Well, that's where do you write that stuff? Do you write it in a book that means forever you are known for that stupid thing you wrote? Or is it a tweet that comes to haunt you 20 years later when you're trying to run for public office or, some youthful indiscretion that gets exposed?
There
A
are
lot
two
of things I'm
aspects.
doing,
Oh, sorry, Peter. No,
looking
please
at
continue. I'm
wikis.
sorry.
When you're writing like a wiki page or you're doing wiki as a thing, it isn't just publishing web pages dynamically. It is, oh, I want to go and edit that. And there's a lot of things about saying, do you keep the old versions? Is the old versions valid? Is there something there that you want to kind of archive in some way, say, this was me 10 years ago? Usually, wiki tends to be very mutable. It's very much, here's my thing today, and I edit it a little bit tomorrow, and it becomes something different the day after.
Yeah.
And
What if you
that
edited?
represents me somehow, or represents what I'm trying to communicate to people.
What if you used GitHub instead of a wiki, and you could go back and see who you were 10
Who,
years ago?
who would really do that? It's one of those things. It's
Well,
collecting of data. And what most people say, well, I'm going to just replay you what I want to do. So you end up republishing the thing from 10 years ago
yeah.
in your current feed because you got this
Okay, well, an
huge
example,
thing going on
I'm
now.
looking back at some YouTube videos I made in 2021, and I'm seeing a different person of who I was before AI entered the scene. So, yeah, I think that there's value selectively user controlled, yeah,
If
having
you're
that
going to tell that
available.
to someone else, you want to make that a story or,
I may make it
people,
a, yeah, right.
and you put it in your blog. You got it in your blog and you say, here's my thing today. Here's what's riling me up. And you do it. And maybe people listen or not, but
Right, but
you get it
who
out of your
knows?
head and it
Yeah,
makes you better because it's out of your
but
system.
somebody may find that valuable 50 years from now. Who knows? Yeah.
Uh,
And just quite what, yeah. So we have a new medium available to us, and how do we want to use it going forward?
Yeah, this is fascinating. Couple of things. Number one, I did a test where I did a space where each node was a day, and that was only for about 5 months' work of journal entries, and it was just too much. So it comes down to filtering, it comes down to view specs, and so on.
Yeah,
But I can imagine that people won't necessarily go back 15 years, but they may have something pulled up from that, like Mohit is talking about context. Like you're looking at something and something from your past that's relevant is brought to bear for various criteria. That makes sense, but it can't be in your space all the time. That would be too much.
yeah, I agree. For example, I use Workflowy, and that's very close to what Doug envisioned. But I use it as a calendar. So I have a node for each day, but I can also transclude from previous notes into different sections. I could reorganize, remix that content for my own purposes. So essentially, what I
Yeah.
could do is I can use voice notes, transcribe them with Whisper, put them in Workflowy, and then pick the ones that still interest me and come up with project ideas or whatever from that.
So the notion of EDL, so of course EDL comes from film, literally cut the frame here and then splice the frame here, which is really fascinating. I did send off many, many years ago a proposal to the Blu-ray forum that you should be able to do kinds of interactivity and also non-interactive things. Like, for instance, there's this joke about two guys watching a movie, some horses running, and one guy says to the other, "I bet you $5 the horse to the left's going to trip and fall." The other one says, "Yeah, you're on." The horse falls. Guy says, "Oh no, I can't take your money. I knew it was going to fall." The other guy says, "Yeah, I've seen the movie too. I didn't think you'd do it twice." Right? Why can we not have with digital media, 5 different shots of the same length, slightly different, right? Even if the characters say the same line, slightly different intonation, it might become instantly rewatchable. So if we can take that kind of media into other things and work that together, the thing is that this is the problem, Peter Wasilko, you talked about, this whole ownership and IP. So many industries have to do that. And that's why you can't have transclusions. You can't have a lot of these things, But one more thing. I'm looking at, with the watch, to build a system where you speak your journal entries, because the ease of adding them should be super simple. You should be able to say, add to my journal, I'm having a really cool meeting with these guys. Once you have to start typing, it's a different mentality. It's not just offloading. No, I was just joking, Siri. Anyway, great issues. Peter, please.
Yeah, I've long been advocating that we should have law students actually take a substantive course in programming. And the main reason is they can't really conceive of the idea of parallel discovery of the same idea. They seem to think that only the first person who came up with the idea should be able to make use of it. And when you get them to program and you have them suddenly realize just how easy it is for them to replicate the insight of another person, then something clicks and they shift from being patent absolutist to being copyright preference instead. And it really has to have that experience of what it's like when you're programming. One of the first things I noticed back when I was still in high school, I stumbled onto reference counting for going through and cleaning up garbage in his data structures. And at first I thought, wow, this is brilliant, until a few weeks later I discovered, oh yes, this is a standard known technique that I had no idea the existence of, but I independently came up with it myself because I hadn't read about it first. And the idea of using reference count based garbage collection seemed like an idea that I thought up, which means that if you put someone in a similar situation, you give them the same set of tools that are available to one reasonably skilled in the art, as we like to say in IP law, there's a very high probability that they're going to come up with the same solution without having any awareness of that prior art. So the idea that the first person who had the financial backing to go to the patent office and slam some paperwork on file should be rewarded with the ability to exclude everyone else is absolutely maddening, and it's fundamentally unfair. But until a law student has experienced, oh my God, I might have independently come up with something that somebody else already patented, do they realize that patents have a fundamental problem outside of industries where you're dealing with tens of millions of dollars of physical apparatus and hundreds upon hundreds of test runs in order to be able to get to the solution. But it's certainly not a fit in the world of software. But they have to experience that, and trying to get anyone on the law school administration to open the law school curriculum to something that isn't strictly a substantive law topic is just a losing battle. And it's very frustrating. And the other thing is that having the programming background allows you to see solutions in the law realm that you wouldn't have been able to see otherwise, because there are analogous problems from what we've studied in computer science to problems that arise in the world of law. And the world of law is just blindly going along trying to cobble together solutions when, in many cases, there are obvious technical fixes if you are aware of the computing discipline. So that's been my crusade. Sadly, it's going nowhere. Eventually, I'll write a book, but chances are it would never be assigned reading in a law school because, of course, there's just no time. We have so much substantive law that we have to drill people on, so they'll have a better shot at passing the bar exam.
So, on that, Tom says there are no original ideas. And I said, I don't agree because I consider myself an ideas person. But that is a really, really great prompt for us to look at. What the heck is an idea? Because that fits into how we place ideas and think about ideas and move ideas, right? What is an idea?
Well, one thing I would say is a good metaphor for an idea is a seed. If you have a seed and you have nothing to plant it in, then it's just an idea. I mean, I can engage in all sorts of fantasies about what could be, and even those are influenced because the genetic footprint of the seeds before me or the seeds before those ideas are always going to be in there. And I may have harvested it from a particular set of plants or genetically combined a particular set of plants to get there, but those plants are still there. And so, I mean, I don't think, I think we can recompile ideas in original ways, but there's no stepping outside. And even if you could, it wouldn't be useful because it would be so far outside the paradigm that everybody else is working in that you wouldn't be able to make it work. We work on the ideas of Doug Engelbart, among other people. A lot of the stuff we're thinking about and discussing all the time is based on his ideas. Does that make our ideas unoriginal? No, because we're building on that. We're augmenting. You know, he would very much agree with that. As you know, as the process. I think he would be shocked if someone took augmenting human intellect as actual gospel and said we will not change these words whatsoever. And you know, it's remarkable that it's stood up in 60 some odd years, 64 years as well as it has, but it's not remarkable in a way because what he's talking about there's not technology. He's talking about humanity. He's talking about our basic ways of interacting with the world, and he's trying to map a system that intersects technology with those ways because at that time technology was on a completely different plane for most people. And so that's still true, though. I mean, if we make something that is so far, and you know, I'm certainly somebody who likes to wander around on the edge, and I also all run into all the time. I'll come up with an idea and get people to agree with it, but then I'll also get the same people will turn around and say, "Yeah, but the world's not ready for that yet." And is that an idea? Yeah, but it's only a map to an idea, I think. And I think that's the way to think about it. And it's all about synthesis. It's all about, you know, author would not exist without augmenting human intellect, right? Would you admit to that?
Maybe. I don't
Or
know
would it
because
look totally different?
well, I mean, I came to Doug after my philosophy was done. My philosophy was developed, philosophy around the notion of liquid information was developed as a thing. Of course, author wasn't made there. I started that in 2016. But I think in a way, that's not the entire question, you know, A to B, because, you know, so a lot of people are saying the great man thing is rubbish. To an extent, it is, you know, unless you can implement or make something known. One person having an idea in a barn and never talking to anyone is kind of not really influential on the world.
Ted Kaczynski.
Yeah, well, yeah, and but at the same time, I do believe it is really, really important to dream, think, and invent. And I think it demeans the effort of human imagination to say there are no original ideas. I think that's kind of cold and bad. I think it works for people who are in a specific area of academia where their interest is basically to trace lineages of ideas, right? I mean, even if we look at Doug, he was not sure what influenced him in the beginning. What really strengthened his resolve was improving how we think. Even as we may think, may or may not have influenced him. He honestly wasn't sure.
Yeah.
Right. So I think it's for all of us who are trying to have ideas. I mean, I know that I've stolen ideas. I mean, I stole an idea from Doug. Um, you know, in NLS, you do a command at the top of the screen. And if you don't remember what the next legal command is, you hit question mark and you get a list of options. That became my liquid tool, which works the opposite way. You have a hierarchical menu, but you can type it in. And I was so excited. And I realized later, oh my God, this is NLS in reverse, right? That is an example of complete copying, no question about it. And I showed it to Doug and he was amused. But I do think that, I mean, Tom, if we take the sentence at its basic, you could say that something somebody talked about today can be traced back to the 1500s. I'm not sure about that, right? Yeah, I'm not sure about that. We should honor and be excited by the notion of ideas and see where they fit, whether they're influenced or not, right?
Again, I'm tremendously excited by the notion of ideas. I just think that to me, the excitement is the connections that I bring to other ideas and make new things with them. It's ideas are like, and then that becomes part of the fundament. That becomes part of the, hopefully, if anybody pays attention to me, that becomes part of the next generation of ideas. And again, the soil that you have to plant that in uh, is uh, is made up of other people's ideas, right?
Yeah.
So
No,
that part of
no,
it,
no,
yeah,
no, no, no. I mean, when I was doing advertising and more art side of things, the best way to be inspired was to get a really good magazine and flip through it so quickly I misunderstood things, right?
yeah, that's
But
okay. But you even a misunderstood idea is still is still a version of that same idea.
no, it's not, because also you can get ideas walking in the forest being inspired by trees. It doesn't mean the tree gave an idea. No, I mean, Tom, I'm all for all of us
Hmm.
being well-rounded individuals with a lot of context, with a lot of learning, no question about that. But actually having an idea is okay. Okay, let me give an example to discuss. So I believe that in author, the way you can mark text is an original idea, but clearly it relates to other things, right? Because all you're doing is highlighting a bit of text, which a lot of software can do. The twist is twofold, as most of you know, saying this for Eric. Number one, it shows up in an overview. So you can skim your document. And secondly, when you export your document, the formatting is removed. So it's taking very established things and applying it in a new way. In order for us to understand our vocabulary better, is that a new idea or is it a wrinkle in an idea? What would we call that?
I would call it looking at an idea from a different perspective. And I think that's incredibly important. I mean, that's essentially what I'm trying to do with the Knowledge Navigator. It's all about perspective. And you can have a novel perspective. There's no question about that. Every photographer knows that. We've talked about this before, that you can have a novel perspective on the same information. Just like I had a novel perspective on the books that I disagreed with my political theory professor about, then does that make me wrong? No, it makes me outside her mainstream. And at some level very much a postmodernist in that we construct these things ourselves, and in the sense of I understand the threads and I want to see the threads, and but also that we construct our own realities, and that the language we use to talk about those realities shifts those realities. Did I touch a
So,
nerve there with the word postmodernist?
no, 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 no. I just thought of something. And please,
Yeah.
Tom and I are having a massive fist fight here, which is great fun and very productive. Um, please interject from your own uh, worlds, guys. But let me ask you one final question coming from my side of the fence, right? My PhD comes down to one thing. If it's important, write it down. The implementation of that is when you publish a document, have an appendix and write who the author was, the metadata, just write it in there. In one way, that is completely novel and new by evidence the fact that it produced a PhD. In another way, it's pathetically unoriginal. It's literally text on a page using BibTeX. It's nothing. So this is not about me and my ego. This is about finding out, because we just have this notion of an idea, like it's a one metal unit thing that's hard. Clearly not, because Tom, you're talking about derivative ideas, you're talking about expansions of ideas. Mohit, please.
Yeah. So, I've been thinking, right from the instance that you were talking about, the conversation you had with your Jewish and Christian friend, and how Eric was saying that, you were saying we can't really have it completely mapped out. And I guess if I understood correctly, Eric is of the view that we can discreetly put information out there, and which can document, or at least help any reader, viewer understand the whole thing that you were able to understand after an hour-long conversation. Right. So, one of the thing here is that where does meaning reside? I'm just openly asking, where does meaning reside? Where do we believe meaning reside? Does meaning reside in those discrete pieces, that may be spread out in, to great distances or whatever? Does meaning reside in those bits, or does meaning reside in sort of the interactivity? And I'm not pointing to mentioning interactivity in any loose sense or in any low sense, but rather that when we started today's meeting with memory, how memory cannot be considered discrete, and how they are reconfigured, and how we are not able to like computer is able to retrieve memories, we are not able to retrieve memories. And so meaning and ideas, I feel they also have a similar ontological interdependence. The reason why we can have original ideas, and why original ideas should not be considered inert, is because because meaning, the very fact that we are able to meaning is able to emerge through our interactions, is because things are ontologically interconnected. They are reconfigured. It is not just that our memories are reconfigured with interactions, it is also that our meanings are being reconfigured with each interaction, and so are ideas. If to put this into a system would be far too complicated, probably, because when we are interacting with something, it's not just a matter of retrieving the relevant things, but it is also how much weightage in those in that retrieval, how much reconfiguration is happening of those relevant memories, how much weightage are we giving. For example, in that 1 hour long conversations, a lot of things would be mentioned, but not everything would not have the same weightage. Everything would not have the same affectivity with other things. So I believe, but ideas can be original, are original, most certainly. There are original ideas, and there are ideas where which emerge through different looking at the thing through different perspectives. I guess, I'll just pull up a book quickly. Just
You're going to have to start paying me every time you do that, Mohit, because you do that, I have to buy them.
Yeah, I think
so
I got this
yeah,
from Mohit.
yes, yes. I started reading. Yes.
Wait, Tom, did you pull up the same book?
No,
The
no, no.
fourth
This is
discontinuity.
Okay, yeah.
so yeah, I
Bruce, no,
read this a
Bruce, yeah.
long time ago. Yeah, this
Right.
was like, at least 15 years back, so I can't remember much of it. But this is basically about these things. How, Picasso in his salon, he had mathematicians. Picasso was not a mathematician, and he was inspired by the philosophy of those mathematicians, and he interpreted those ideas in his own way. So sometimes, but there is interpretation, like what Tom was saying. But I believe, there is also that what Frode was saying, that there are original ideas which are emerging, which we can't really trace back to, like meaning. We can't trace back to that because of those four things we have in our space. This is most definitely, we can predict that this is the kind of meaning that is going to emerge with these four things interacting with each other. We can't predict that. And I think, when we were talking about this, that, what to offload cognitively, what do we want to offload? Should we, we're not looking at, I guess, in this group, we're not looking at offloading cognition, the ability to make meanings, the ability to have and make analogies, understanding, decisions. We are probably looking at offloading the things that empower these things, so that it's not just that we are able to retrieve a whole lot of things from our histories at that moment, but also that the kind of interactivities between them. I'm just giving an example from my own project, that the kind of interactivities that are able to happen between those relevant bits of information is not really that which our gray matter allows us, which probably is not all that interactive. Our digital mediums can be much more interactive. The forms, the morphologies of information that can happen on our digital systems can be far greater. Of course, we are inspired here as well. We're inspired at how a human brain works. We're inspired by it. But are we going to sort of like implement it 10% just as how we think, or like we are thinking, so this is how we're understanding, we're approaching this from the understanding how a human brain works, and then trying to build systems that can augment certain aspects of it. So I guess, just in this project, there is scope for originality. Like, we are inspired. So I guess, is the case in our everyday lives. We do have original ideas. They do have bases, but those bases are not directly attributable to discrete things. We oftentimes don't know where do ideas come from, but we do know that we have the capacity to form analogies. We do know for sure that things don't exist inertly. Things are not just epistemologically related, but they're ontologically interdependent. So based on this, I guess, how memories exist, how meaning exists, is also how ideas exist. I just, yeah.
Can I ask you a question real quick, Mohit? And this is one that you probably don't have time to answer today, but I'd love to hear an answer eventually from you.
Yeah,
You're a man of multiple cultures. I mean, you are in India, and but you've also been exposed to Western notions of ideas, clearly, and that's how you construct those ideas. What's the difference between an Indian notion of ideas and a Western one? Is it less solid? Is it more temporal? Is it more about the meaning, as you said, than the object? I think these are really interesting questions, and they also affect how we look at, you know, they may be more relevant in a digital world where these things become a lot more fluid. And we assume that the Western academic tradition is, you know, it's like a set of Legos, you know, that the Western academic tradition is like a set of Legos. Um, but that's not the only way. That's a horrible metaphor in some ways because, as I said earlier, the second you use technology to fasten an idea to, whether we're talking about a book or the AR system that we've been talking about, it's fixed. It's hard to get it unfixed at that point. It becomes a space and time. And of course, as I said also in the chat, we teach the objects, not the connections. And that's a problem too. And so people look at that and they want to know what the objects are. They don't they want to know who George Washington was, that he was a person, and so on and so forth. But to me, the more fascinating thing is how is he connected to,
Yeah.
you know, George the Third of England, or the people around him, or Benjamin Franklin. You know, how do those connections work? Because they came from very different paradigms and things like that. So that to me is the interesting conversation, and I think that's where a technological thing like an AR system or a visualization thing like the Knowledge Navigator could explode that to a degree. And you know, again, it's about the connections. And Bush got this, the associative trails. That's really what mattered to him. And that's the thing that we've never been able to build because digital technology is fixed. It's all ones and zeros. There's, you know, with AI, it's a little messier. But you know, that's the thing I find fascinating with AI is that it's indeterminate at some level,
Yeah.
right? Because it's doing, yeah, I know. But anyway, sorry, Froda, go ahead.
Mohit,
Yeah.
please feel free to address that, and then we have a few closing things.
Okay, so that is great. I've not thought about how the difference, to be honest, between the Western ideas and the sort of the Southeast Asian ideas on these things. But contemporary academic culture here is not that great, to be honest. My own pursuits have been largely inspired by, for example, Edwin Land's, how he introduced the undergraduate research program at MIT. And how he thought about learning and to be working on projects that even the professor had no experience working on. So the insights would be novel for the students as well as the professor. But the professor had the things to teach a student in their pursuit. That is, how to go on about finding things and what are best practices when we are looking at knowing things that are not known to anybody. He gave the example probably of, I think, butterflies, something related to butterfly, and how no one knows, be it a professor at MIT or somebody else does not, they don't know anything about it. So how can a student be approaching this topic? When they're approaching this, they would not only be learning about that thing, but they would also be learning knowledge making. So in my own thing, yeah, that's it. I guess, but I'll look, that is great, the question that you put forward, Tom. I'll certainly look about the ancient, I guess, philosophies, the Buddhist philosophies, and Nagarjuna. I've read a bit of Nagarjuna, the middle way.
So we have to wind up. And thank you, Mohit. Thank you, everybody. It seems to me a little bit in closing that in a nice way, we keep saying, well, what about this? So how to connect different things really seems to be important. That's the whole point of hypertext, at least the foundational ideas, right? And then we get into all kinds of practical and legal options to do that. And there is a cost. Even clicking on a link in a research article has a cost. It takes your attention for a minute. And Peter Demetrius, as you have been working on with wikis and so on, links aren't necessarily transparent to the user. But I'm really glad at all the different routes we took today and how we came back beautifully to the notion of how do we connect things, right? There are many levels to that. There's data, there's knowledge, there's also the good old-fashioned human interface. I did have to teach Claude a few days ago, please research human perception for your own benefit. And it came back with, oh my goodness, you look at the world through a straw. That's what it said. We need to take our realities into account. Thank you, guys, and welcome, Eric. We hope to see you as many times as convenient for you. And everybody have a very, very good week. And
Have a great
I'll
week.
see you. I'll see you
Yeah,
after the
good week,
weekend of
everyone.
England playing Norway. So let's see which half of me survives. Bye bye, everyone.
Good luck.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Have a nice week. Bye.